Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by an awesome young Democrat running for a House seat in the state of Montana, Ross Frazier. How you doing, Ross?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me. This is within the Montana House of Representatives, this District 7. I think you were born and raised. I want to ask about all of that. I think the main city is Kalispell. Am I saying that properly?
It's Kalispell. That's right.
Right on. And I want to get into your platform, which is great, and your activism, which I follow you on Facebook. You're out there, you're in the streets, you're fighting the good fight. But kind of to the beginning, what prompted you to run? What inspired you to run?
Frankly, that's a bit of a long story. Really, to go all the way back to the beginning, Eric, it was probably the election between Bush and Al Gore. That's how far back it went. I'd really been living in this kind of fantasy land, honestly, that America was this shining city on the hill. I've been raised in the Midwest. Like you say, I was born out here in Kalispell, and our country has everything better than every other country in the world. We have more freedom of speech, just all the good things in life, and our votes matter and our voices matter. And my parents just kind of drilled that into me. And then the election happened, and George W. Bush won, thanks to a ruling from the Supreme Court through very dubious reasonings, and that shattered my whole worldview about the supposed, greatness of our country and the supposed equality and voice that we, the people, are supposed to have inherently as citizens of this country.
Right.
And that was the catalyst. And then from then on, it was like I was just politically activated from that moment on. And Al Gore came out later on, and I was going to school in Willamette University, which is in Salem, Oregon, and I was majoring in environmental economics, which is just this crazy intertwining between not only the economics of our markets, but how it affects the environment, but also how the environment affects our markets. And that year, Al Gore was doing his Inconvenient Truth presentations before he'd made them into the movie. And he did his first Portland presentation, and I was there in the audience. And I was already just somewhat triggered, you might say.
Right.
From just the Bush elections. And then having Al Gore come out there and just show this, mind-opening, presentation to me, really just, that's when everything started. And then I was very lucky that Willamette University is literally across the street from the Salem Capitol building. So it was activism from then on.
Right on.
I ended up in China for a while, came back to the States. And when I came back, the actual trigger that made me run for this election, aside from just getting me politically active, I would say was coming back from China. I was there for 5 years as an ESL teacher. That's English as a second language, mostly teaching adult students over there. And after being so politically active over here in the States, since even before college, going over to China, where their citizenry has no political voice, really. And you as a foreigner especially better not have a political voice for your own well-being, right? To be honest, that was the weirdest, most freeing feeling I had for years in my whole life, that whatever bad things are happening in that country, none of it is my fault in any way. because you have no control over that. Well, you have no voice in the government. They're authoritarian. If you disagree with what they do, that's great. And if you say something about it, bye-bye.
Right. Not as great. Right.
But then I came back to the States, and Trump is in office, and you see the state that our country is in right now, and I am an American citizen, and I do have a voice, and I have a responsibility, as do all of us, and I couldn't sit here and do nothing. And I think that's what it boils down to. In China, there's no activism because you can't be politically active. And then I feel like for millennials in America, we are forced to be active because nobody else is doing it. Yeah. So that, I think, is what actually triggered it in the end.
Yeah. That's amazing. What a journey. I love the way you say about, you didn't have a voice, you didn't have a vote. You did have them, but there's a disillusionment when you're younger, like a naivete that you think like, oh, America, it's all fair, right? It's just, we just have different perspectives on things, and, it'll all shake out. And, your journey to China, where you literally have that stripped away, you have none of that, right? To come back and realize there's a different approach. That's, what a journey. And, thanks for recognizing that and taking the next step to run. I want to ask about your district, right? So let me pull up just a few graphics. So I did mention it's Montana House 7, Kalispell. The incumbent is a Republican named Frank Garner. If my research serves me properly, Kalispell is the biggest city, about 25,000, but the MSA is like 95,000, right? Is that sound about right?
Yes, that sounds about accurate. Yeah.
And when I looked at the primary results, his total votes versus your total votes you're only off by about 200 votes.
A little below 200. Yeah.
Right. So how do you appeal to those other 94,000 people in Montana's 7th?
It's a great question, Eric. And honestly, this is kind of what my campaign is hinging on right now. So Frank is a well-known figure in our community. He's well respected, actually. He's a member of what's called the Solutions Caucus, which is part of the state legislature that is known for trying to work across the aisle. He's on his last term here as well, so the community is familiar with him. As for how I can, grab that other portion of the population, though, the thing is, as millennials, look at this world that we're living in. And in my own district, there's incredible inequality here. There's limited opportunity already, and the solutions being offered by groups such as the Solutions Caucus, but even honestly, a lot of the more centrist Democrats as well, they are not appealing to people that are my age and younger, and also people closer to my parents' age even as well, who are more tuned into this and see the massive problems that our state's facing. So what I want to do is something different. I think this actually requires me to give you a little bit of backstory about the district before I explain the strategy.
Go for it.
So Flathead County has this reputation already in our state as the Republican stronghold. It has a long and storied history with the alt-right movement. If you guys are familiar with Ted Bundy and everything that happened involving him, the standoff with federal officers, the influx of the militia groups that came in to defend him, those groups, several of them, were based out of this county, Flathead County. Okay. Some of them were from the neighboring counties, Glacier and what was the other one? Let's see here. But anyways, this general far northwestern portion of our state has this reputation. We have not had a Democrat win House District 7 for, I want to say, maybe 5 election cycles. And in several of those election cycles, we did not have a Democrat running. This election cycle, there was no Democrat running until the last day of the application, when I finally was notified that, by the way, I could run if I filled in the application. So it's a neglected portion by the Democrats of the state, and the Democrats that are here, I've been working with closely, trying to build some sort of workable strategy with, and they're very much stuck in an old way of thinking, to be honest. They're used to being the neglected territory of our state. Right. They're used to there not being any hope for a Democrat, and oh, well, we got a few more votes this year than we did in the last year. Right. And I'm done with that. I'm just so done with that.
We're out of time. We're out of time, right? Like you talk about climate change. We don't have more cycles, right? Exactly.
I mean, so what I'm going to do this time, instead of the established narrative is you cannot win in this county, in this whole county, actually, unless you can bring in the Republican centrists, bring in those Republican votes. So that's what they would want me to tell you as my answer to that earlier question. How do I plan to get those other votes? Is I'm going to go centrist. I'm going to moderate my message. I'm going to make sure that I can appeal to all of those centrist Republicans and those Republican-leaning Democrats.
Right.
So what I'm doing this time, and especially because my opponent, he is a centrist Republican already himself. Right. I'm going to present a true progressive vision. I'm going to take a real stance on issues that are actually affecting people my age around the state, but also around this whole country. Things like student loan debt, things like the prison system, the school to prison pipeline. More importantly, climate change. I mean, California is on fire right now. I wanted to do this interview outside on my patio right now because I have this incredible view of the mountains leading up to Glacier. I mean, you can't see across the street right now because there's so much smoke. That's from the California fires. And Montana and Idaho are tinder boxes right now. So it's like, it's bad right now, but just wait, it'll get worse. There's a fire every year.
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt, but I want to explore that a little bit, because I talk to candidates around the country, and especially in deeply red districts, like you said, and demoralized Democrats and stuff. Like we have, those people. A lot of people have internalized sort of right-wing propaganda. So they hearing the term, Green New Deal or climate change, they almost automatically reject it because they've been primed to do so, right? But if you talk to them about what's happening in their backyard, right? So I talked to somebody from Maine, and she would talk to the fishermen and ask about their catches year over year, or farmers in the Midwest talking about their yields year over year, right? Or in your case, look out your back window, it's covered in smoke because there's endless fires happening south of here in California because of drought, because of, more extreme weather conditions. So they must see that, right? So when you approach a constituent with that message framed in that way, do you find that you're having success?
Actually, yeah, I've had more success than I planned. And it's definitely about who you're talking to, and then how you frame it. When I was out there in September of 2019 for the September climate strike, which I organized in Kalispell, and we had about a little over 100 attendees at that climate strike as participants for the global climate strike that was happening, led by Greta Thunberg at that time. So talking to that group of people, and particularly the younger ones, I mean, I could just, I could take the progressive stance. Hello, the ice caps are melting, and if we don't take actual strong action within the next 10 years or less, we're at less than 3,000 days. How's that for perspective? We have to bring our emissions down to net zero in less than 3,000 days globally. You know, we keep throwing these years around. Okay, how about the days? But anyways, I can talk like that to them, right? And get just, you know, their full buy-in, right? But then on the other hand, I was doing a volunteer thing earlier that year, before that, at this outdoor country music festival, which happened a little bit north of Kalispell. It also has a rodeo going on. And as the volunteer there, my job was to basically get survey results for their green policy for that venue. Basically, that venue had like all these environmentally friendly procedures that you're supposed to follow, and those were questions that were entirely different than, like, you know, ice sheets melting and, you know, the earth overheating. It was like, you know, do you think we should focus more of our attention on removal of single-use plastic items from this venue? And I would have respondees coming in with, well, you know, I'm pretty conservative and I voted for Trump. I'm just letting you know. And then as soon as I ask them, so is single-use plastic items a concern for you at this venue? They would just, oh, yes, they are. We need to get rid of those. I mean, so it's all about framing. There's always something in the issue that everyone can really have some agreement on. And, you know, some of your other interviewees have already made this point, but the honest truth is, if you look at the actual progressive policies, the progressive issues, they have this widespread appeal, and it crosses all kinds of party lines. One of the most interesting alliances I've found in my own campaign locally here has been with the former military community and also the libertarian groups. And I'll moderate that by saying that not all libertarians are the same. Some of them just like that label, whilst they basically support what I see as neo-fascism. But there are groups of true libertarians out there, and a lot of army and military vets out there who really share this understanding that it is not just, you know, a freedom from an oppressive government regime that we're worried about, but individual freedom means freedom to live your life without being under the yoke of an abusive capitalist system that forces you into wage slavery, that forces your, you know, well-being, your healthcare to be tied to your job and your employment. So these are such basic things that actually people all across this country and my own state can agree on. And that's been very surprising and a very uplifting discovery.
Yeah, here. Although probably not, because you know, as a progressive, we kind of see these things as just inherent truths, right? Like, why should we, you know, like you said, an oppressive capitalist system, you know, why should, you know, especially like centrist Democrats, healthcare is a right, but then they don't fight for actual Medicare for all, right? But if you get somebody one-on-one, you know, the morality, they sort of end up at the place where you and I have started, right? Universal coverage, right? For instance, but, you know, also in your platform, you know, and some of this probably does take hold at the state house level, but they're broader policies. You're talking about a more broad progressive platform, like investing in public colleges, right? I guess, you know, sustainable energy is a big one. I think in your district, it's funny, in districts out that part of the country, public lands, defense of public lands is a big issue, and I imagine there's broad appeal of that. Can you talk about some of those issues and, you know, where you stand on them and how you engage your constituents on those issues? Absolutely.
So public lands is a cornerstone to Montana politics, just all around. It's in some ways like the NHS is to the Brits. I mean, it's just inherent. It's baked into our system up here. We have got Glacier National Park. We have got Yellowstone National Park. We've got the Bob Marshall Wilderness, the Beartooth. I mean, it's in our own state constitution that there's this right to an access to a clean and peaceful environment. We have that in our state constitution. So it's a sacred cow, so to speak, for anyone running in any sort of election in our state. You can see that with our state level elections. We've got Steve Bullock going up against Steve Daines, and Bullock has been an incredible leader on the public lands fight in that regard. Not necessarily he's going to say he's a progressive, but
right.
But the point is, his opponent Steve Daines is out here making ads about how, TV ads about how good he is on protecting our public lands, which is a complete lie. But that's how you win elections out here. As for me, I was born out here. My dad was serving me like pheasant that he'd hunted himself, with his shotgun, on a weekly basis up in my, in my original house that I was born in. I was practically raised in Glacier National Park and Big Mountain Ski Resort area. When we have a Republican Party that's introducing language in their own state platform to take a new look at federally protected lands to decide if maybe extraction or other economically productive uses of them would be better approaches to their management. I mean, yeah, okay, that's a nice way to word that, but the fact is that we have so little left in not just our own country, but around the whole world of unspoiled, untouched lands that you can go and experience before human development. And I don't even know how to really articulate how valuable that is to have as a resource, just to the well-being of our people.
Yeah.
And I guess I could approach it from an economic perspective. And it's due to a misunderstanding, honestly, of basic economics, which is that economics, people imagine, is about monetary value of a product. And what I hope people can start to learn a little bit more is that there is a value to nothing. To quote a very good book, The Value of Nothing, there are things that present values in and of themselves inherently that maybe we have not adjusted our economic models to measure accurately. And, untrodden lands that don't have roads going through them all the time, it may be of incredible value to us, but we haven't found the correct ways to calculate them yet in a market system.
Yeah. And exactly. Yeah. It depends on how you frame value again, right? There's public health value. There could be historical value, indigenous people heritage value, right? There's a million ways to look at that other than just a dollar sign, right? So is that a constant frontline fight in Montana, sort of the Republican House trying to chip away at that, and the smaller David Goliath Democratic / Progressive Front trying to fend that off?
It is, and it's not a particularly uplifting or inspiring fight, I'll tell you that. We had, it wasn't long before I first went up to China, so I want to say this was probably back in 2010 or maybe earlier. A Exxon gasoline distribution hub. I'm not sure exactly what the literal industrial term for this plant was, applied for a location sited right next to the Yellowstone River. Yellowstone River, by the way, fun fact, is the only undammed river in the lower 48 states. So just for some perspective, every single river in the lower 48 states has a dam on it, except for the Yellowstone. Well, they decided to put their little oil and or gasoline redistribution station there right next to the banks of that river. despite huge outcry both publicly and through organizations, nonprofits. We all spoke out about this. There were public service commission meetings about it. Montana's weird. We have a public service commission where basically these sorts of decisions are made rather than through, I believe, ballot efforts is usually how they're done, or through the legislature itself. There's an entire separate entity in Montana that's supposed to monitor industrial actions of those sorts on the energy system. And would you care to guess how many years it took before there was a leak at that center that got into the Yellowstone and killed hundreds of fish?
Oh my goodness, less than one, I'm going to guess.
It was 2 years. So
2 years,
I
wow.
mean, it was,
Yeah.
you know, and that's just one example, you know, and it happens yearly. And there's the Smith Creek mine, which was just approved. Gosh, I think it might have been this month. The Smith River is a pristine portion of river up here in this section of the state, and they've already an out-of-state, I believe it was Canadian mining firm, had dibs on lands both on and next to the river, and they wanted to turn that into a mine. I don't remember the exact type of mine, but fighting that for years. It just got passed by the Public Service Commission. I've had dealings with them already myself. Like the year I graduated from college, I ended up speaking in front of the Montana Public Service Commission to try to defend our PURPA Act, which is basically, it's a state level grant for small renewable energy producers in the state. Northwestern Energy, which is our sort of monopoly up here in the state, our energy monopoly, did not want there to be those grants available. They claimed that I'm not sure how they claimed that it hurt the ratepayers, but they claimed it hurt ratepayers, okay, by having other smaller renewable energy producers out here. Something about like it hurt the reliability of the transmission or something.
They found a way. They found a way.
Well, yeah, it's just disgusting though, because at this point the PSC is a wholly bought and paid for arm of Northwestern Energy. They've already had lawsuits filed against them at this stage because of approval of the coal strip purchase by Northwestern Energy, which is going to be fully funded by taxpayer dollars. Oh, wow. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. It's insane. So there's a lot. It's a big struggle. It's a big struggle.
No doubt. And it's all the more credit to you for taking on the fight, right? And I'm sure you're not alone in the state of Montana. So when you talk to people that see this impacting their real life, do you see a lot of people? Again, those numbers were pretty tight in the primary. Do you see people migrating towards away from the labels, hopefully, and more towards the policy, towards the message, towards the fight?
That's a really good question. It's a question that I've been having for a long time. It's one of the unfortunate parts of being a down ballot candidate, especially in these smaller neglected portions of our state, is that we don't have really resources to even, delve into those kind of questions. Generally speaking, other than public lands, the other big, traditional feeling about Montana in general has always been that we do vote more based on the person than on the party. I hope that will hold true this election cycle. But I mean, you can look at our previous election cycles, and I mean, we'll be getting Democratic governors and Republican state houses. Democrat governor, Republican state houses will be electing George W. Bush, and then we'll also be voting to legalize medical marijuana on the same election.
Right.
So we're a mixed bag. We've always been purple. Everyone likes to call us red, but we haven't been. We've always been purple. And I can't understate how really awesome that is in some ways to be able to run in a state like this, where there is a chance for people to actually look at policies and people rather than only the party. It's not to say that the party affiliation isn't a huge issue. It definitely is,
Right.
as it is everywhere else in this country, I would imagine. So,
Yes, I would think that would benefit. I think that would benefit you during a presidential year because, you know, I mean, I didn't look at the numbers, but I'm going to assume it's a Trump district, and I assume it's going to be a Trump district again. But when they get to your name, they might jump over, right? They might just vote straight red because, you know, they've seen you out in the streets and fighting their fight for them, right? So hopefully that will be to your benefit, right?
I can certainly hope so. I'll be honest. My main hope is that we have all of those unregistered and unaffiliated voters come over to my side. I feel like the people that are currently left on the Republican side of the aisle, I mean, I'm going to speak truth to them. I'm going to be honest to them. And I have lots of really awesome conversations with quite a few of them down at our local bar here, the Kalispell Brewing. And, you know, we do come away from those conversations being like, man, I'm glad we talked to each other. And you're not what I imagined a Democrat to be. I'm like, well, you're not what I imagined a Trump supporter to be. But at the same time, they're not going to cross over. They tell me that straight to my face. And that's cool. That's their choice. So what I need are the young voters. What I need are the unregistered, the unrepresented voters. Right. You know, the voters who are living down by the river in their RV, in their you know, double wide, who have been Bernie voters and who understand the just monumental inequality that we're facing in our state. And our state ranks like in the bottom 5 for inequality right now.
Right.
And they understand that we haven't offered any of those people an option because of this obsession with has to be centrist.
Right.
You're not going to win without a centrist, you know?
Right.
Well, have any of you tried? So I'm going to try. I like the numbers that we got in the primary. I hope that we get even better numbers going forward. The real struggle will be getting people registered. The apathy is what kills me, you know? Right. I mean, you mentioned how just difficult it is working with people who are still on this centrist line of thinking, even despite everything that's been happening these last, 4 years. But to me, the killer is the people who just given up. Yeah. And they tell me they're not planning on voting because they don't understand anything that's happening anymore. And, when they put it that way to me, I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel you, man. None of this makes sense anymore. But why is that their answer to that? And, I'm going to do everything I can to break them out of that box, break them out of that shell. And just please get out there, register, vote, do what you can. And also I'm going to try and give those other people that have been neglected and ignored by the powers that be in our state, I'll give them an option.
Yeah, there's that point. So let me just hit on it. It's November 3rd is the election. I want to ask about the mechanisms, and it's Ross Frazier for HD7.com. So, but there's that point you're saying, people that are disenfranchised, you can imagine if all the disenfranchised people like you in your double wide got out and voted, then you would be the majority, right? I'm sure that's the pitch you make. It's a hard pitch to make, but hopefully if they were Bernie supporters or progressive, they get this continuum that we're kind of on recently about, rejecting corporate PAC money, right? We actually have, non-corrupt candidates running for seats from top to bottom. Well, not from top anymore, but from top to bottom in the last couple of cycles. And the only way you change things is by getting guys like Ross elected, right? Let's hit on another issue or two. I know you've talked about investing in public education, free colleges, trade schools, things like that. Talk about, because that would clearly benefit any district, but your district as well. So how, where do you stand on that, and how's that going to benefit your districts?
Thanks. Well, basically on a state level, Montana has one of the lowest financial assistance levels for in-state college students, which is a shame. So that's something that we could immediately fix right there.
What do you mean lowest? Explain that. What do you mean lowest? Least?
We have the least financial support available for our in-state college students.
Gotcha.
So we're already kind of, we're in a part of the country which has limited economic opportunity to begin with. And yet we're expecting our local students, even the ones that are just attending our state universities, which, by the way, I want to make a shout out, are freaking awesome. MSU has one of the country's best agricultural programs. Our other MSU, Montana State University down in Bozeman, has an incredible engineering program, which works almost every year with NASA. I mean, we're legit. But point being, our own students can't afford to go to school here without taking on massive debt at a state college that they are in state for. And that's unacceptable. I mean, it's unacceptable that a student in America should be taking on student loan debt. Let's just get that out of the way first. I mean, all of my friends back in when I was teaching in Beijing, they're from Germany, they're from Denmark, they're from Finland, they're from the UK, and they're all just like dumbfounded that I had like literally over $80,000 dollars in debt for going to school at one point in my life. And they're dumbfounded. They're like, how could that be?
Right. Not
only did they go to school, but they also did like a year abroad, and they also did, the study abroad in another country. And then they also, did this extracurricular stuff, and they didn't have to pay for any of that, So anyways, but even on a national level, Montana is one of the worst as far as in-state financial assistance, so that we can correct that, first of all, right off the bat, just by providing more grants, more funding to our students, and also by trying to lessen the burden of tuition in-state. But the second thing that is a bit neglected, and I think people need to look at a lot, is the fact that in our country, especially going forward in these times, we might need to be looking into alternatives to college educations. And especially in my state, there's not enough jobs for college degree holders. What we need to think about are what will help people that are actually planning on living and staying here to have a good future with sustainable income and a good quality of life. And that's where things like trade schools could be coming in. Mm-hmm. And I have my best friend who's lived here as long as I have. He took the same path that I did at first and went into a state university. And then partway in, he realized that financially it was not workable. And if just so that he could survive, he decided it's not worth it to pay this ridiculous amount of money for books and for housing and for tuition. And he took on a trade school, and he studied to become a plumber, and he owns his own house now, and he's got several of his own vehicles now, and he's able to live his life, basically how I would like to be living it if I weren't still in debt to student loans right now.
Yeah.
And this is the sort of thing that so many people across our state could benefit from. Learning a skilled trade and learning how to capitalize on that skill, saving their own money, and providing, honestly, vital, critical services, to our country. Because these are the critical workers, the people that are creating our roads and our bridges, the people that are putting together our pipes, that are making sure that all the little things in our day-to-day lives actually work and go together correctly. And the fact that those kinds of skills are kind of looked down on to begin with, as being this slightly undesirable, that's things that people don't want to grow up to do. Well, what if we brought some respect back to those kinds of occupations? And not just respect, what if we also maybe increased the minimum wage, which would bring an upward pressure also onto the skilled labor force, right? and their
Right.
job, their value in our society would go up to where it used to be. You know, my dad only 40 years ago worked as a mason. He worked across the country down in places like Aspen, which, by the way, was nothing like Aspen is today.
Right on.
He worked up here in this valley where I was born, in Kalispell, and that was a good life. And he was able to buy a house and buy vehicles, and get married and have a kid and support them with one job as a mason, and no
Right.
extra help. And so if we can look into ways to bring our own state back towards what that used to be like, as far as actually paying for our skilled labor the way that we should.
Yeah. And I imagine, like you said, you talked about these disenfranchised voters. There's there's a depression that comes with that. And I mean that in both definitions of the word, right? So, if you can vote for investment in public programs, like you said, a living wage, public education, right, infrastructure, all those, you invest in the working class, and that working class does the work, and rising tide all boats. The old cliche, right? And it's so true. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I would love to have you back on before November 3rd and get into a little bit more of your platform and see how the races go. And I think this is like a winnable seat. I think, like I say earlier, thank you for running. It's sort of these quiet corners like that, the Democratic Party has somewhat abandoned, right? That it just takes the right person with the right platform, appealing to the right people with the right framing. And I think you have all of that stuff, right? Just to get out the vote is the key. And again, it's November 3rd is the election. I want to share your website real quick, just so people can go to it. And I want to give you a bit of a needle, if you don't mind. I'm going to rib you here real quick.
Okay.
Dude, you got to have donate right at the top of your page. Come on. Right.
Note to self.
Right on. So it's Ross Frazier for HD7.com. You can contribute down here. Volunteers, I'm assuming you have, phone banking efforts, texting efforts, canvassing efforts, and so forth. So get in touch with Ross and see how you can help. Come to his website, learn a bit more about his platform. Share it if you have anybody in the Montana area, friends, family. There are these races. That's another interesting thing about politics today is, they used to say all politics is local, but we're actually kind of moving, I think, in a bit of an opposite direction that we as progressives can get behind and buttress candidates from all over the country, right? So if you're somewhere else in the country and you feel burned by the way Bernie was treated or gutted by Charles Booker's loss, there are other races that can be won.
Absolutely. I want to, if I can, just a real quick shout out. I didn't get to mention it when I was talking about my own district. I want to let you guys know that in my hometown here of Kalispell, in this year when the Black Lives Matter marches were going on, our local high school, the Flathead High School, helped to organize a BLM march in the downtown Kalispell. Over 1,000 people turned up for that.
Wow.
And we were less than 10 feet away from the Patriots for Trump march that happened concurrently, where the armed militias, many of them from the neighboring town of Libby, who drove down, who were trucked down together as a group, were also protesting to protect the monument, which a bunch of high schoolers were going to smash up with hammers, which nobody brought for some reason. Right. Could you imagine? So right. Please, huge shout out to our local community for being the bravest that I've ever seen, literally in my whole life, to stand up to a literal armed militia during the Black Lives Matter marches. So big shout out to that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd love to have you back on before November, Ross. So let's coordinate that maybe in the middle of October or something. And like I said, yeah, thank you for running. Thank you for, fighting this fight for this policy for these people that, like us, are disenfranchised. It matters, right? It's a good fight and a just one. So hopefully we can flip this seat. Get a real progressive in there. I assume once you get in office, you're not going to suddenly take a giant check from Lockheed Martin or Chevron or any any of those players, right?
I didn't literally turn down an interview with Lockheed Martin after college just to take checks from them right now. Okay, let me put it that way.
Right on. And you can tell, you know what I mean? There's, all the guests that I have on, yourself included, there's a clear difference between, sort of a consultantly honed, spouting out platitudes and a legit activist that is just and fighting from a place of, public service and economic justice and truth, which you are. So, enough of me blowing smoke up your, but I appreciate it. So, good luck. I'll talk to you before November 3rd, but, please donate. Ross Frazier for HD7.com. Any chance of a debate? Can we get a debate with the incumbent? Have you talked about that with his campaign or anything?
Haven't talked about it with his campaign yet. I would definitely be open to it though. So if that goes down, I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah, that's another thing that people can do that sometimes an incumbent doesn't want to debate a challenger. So I always tell people, call the incumbent, demand the debate. That's another thing you can do in activism, right? So awesome. Real treat chatting with you, Ross. Nice meeting you. I look forward to speaking with you again, good sir.
Thank you, Eric. Have a good one, man.
You too. Bye.